let go of our passivity in front of death and starting to face it as a natural consequence of living. Actually, living is only interesting because living ends at one point, because we have a certain set amount of years, a certain destiny, a certain character that we live out in this life, a certain mission, certain purpose, certain soul that we can explore now. So there's a lot of examples in the Christian faith for interesting miraculous occurrences around death, and as Oriel mentioned, 250 Christian saints have been known to have incorruptible bodies, meaning that they were put into the ground, either just their body or with a casket, and eventually exhumed again, like dug up again, and found to be either completely uncorrupted, completely as if they just fell asleep, or with very little signs of decay that are unexplicable by science. And as this has occurred throughout the centuries, throughout the decades many times, and also within this last few hundred and a bit years that are more in the light of the scientific revolution, there have been a lot of examinations of these bodies, and nobody can explain how this works. So it is indeed very miraculous. Now, also Christianity and the saints of Christianity have been known for the crazy and horrible, horrible deaths of Christian saints. Well, starting with Christ himself and other crucifixions to follow after that. And then many, many martyrs that were extremely hard to kill, from tiny little women that would be exposed to horrible, horrible torture, and it would be written in the books of the torturers, okay, we did this, 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 and this, and this little tiny tender person just doesn't seem to react to any of it. She just doesn't seem to even be fazed by it. One of these saints that was quite impressive is Santa Caterina of Siena, and she had been tortured in horrible, horrible ways, and quite often so in the attempt to kill her by putting her on some crazy wheels and stretching her in I don't know what way, she would just touch the device and it would fall apart. So interesting ways of avoiding even being touched in that way. Nevertheless, in the end of all these horrible tortures that she went through, when she was put in front of the choice, all right, so we have two choices here. Either you renounce Jesus or we cut off your head. She went to the chopping block there, put her head down, and finally they chopped off her head and managed, by her commencing it, by her giving her consent, so to say, and choosing clearly, okay, I know that I stand for my beliefs, then it was possible to kill her. Even though the deaths of many Christian saints have been horrible, also many of them have been sweet. These saints falling asleep, being fully intact, and therefore being able to show this incorruptibility of the body, as I will speak about a little bit now. There's another Saint Catherine of Bologna who was one of the, let's say, earlier documented cases. She died in 1463, was buried without a casket, and after some weeks was dug up and didn't decay. Then people were like, well, it's just a few weeks ago, maybe this is not so impressive, even though she didn't have any particular smell, and also not the hardness, the stiffness of the body that a corpse usually had. So they were like, okay, let's check it out. And they kept her out, and she wouldn't just not decay, and is still sitting in a chair since 1500. She's sitting there. So since the year 1500, they put her into that chair, dressed her nicely. Her skin has darkened, but she is complete. She's just not going anywhere, just sitting there in her skin, and radiating her miraculous appearance into the city of Bologna. Another case that is a bit more recent and that you could still check out if you wanted to, again in Italy, the great Padre Pio, who performed many, many miracles throughout his life, especially healing miracles. He also was having the stigmata of Jesus in his hands and feet. And he would be known to pray continuously the rosary. He would fall asleep with it and in the morning start praying again. He was very tested throughout his life with a lot of temptations, and he would sort of be known for continuously choosing against temptation and for the virtuous life somehow. His body stayed intact for over 40 years after his death. And there's like a whole procedure somehow how the Catholic Church will decide if it is a saint or not. And one of the things is that the person needs to be buried and then exhumed, like brought back from the earth. So they need to be buried for some time for the Catholic Church to consider it really incorruptible. So you cannot smear them with stuff and so on. They have earth around them, and or at least a crypt or something around them that is more burial-like somehow. When they went the first time into Padre Pio's grave to check how he's doing, basically, there was absolutely no bad smell in the grave. Instead, it was smelling actually nice. And as it was said, for 40 years he didn't rotten at all. And eventually, after he was then declared a saint, they balmed him so it can stay even more nice and put him on display, and you can still see his very intact body in Italy. One of my absolute love of my heart saints is the wonderful Saint Charbel. He is a Lebanese Christian hermit. He led a very humble life from a very young age. He was just always found praying in his childhood, in his teenage years, eventually joined the monastery and just prayed and prayed and prayed all the time, and of course did the humble works within the monastery that were needed. And he performed these very sweet miracles in his daily life. For example, he was able to light up water. They had played a trick on him, and instead of filling up his little lamp that he's using in the room with oil, they had filled it up, some of the little friars there of the monastery had filled it up with water. And he took the lamp, thank you so much, and lights it up and puts it on the table. They're completely baffled what is going on. They blow it off, they try themselves, it doesn't work. And they ask Charbel, can you light it up again? He lights it up again. I said, but you brought me the lamp, there, it's lighting already. So he had this sort of very sweet, humble capacities that were still completely mind-blowing and miraculous and supernatural. And when he died, they buried him normally. And many people, believers and non-believers, reported that they would see light in the night above his grave. And they were all a bit spooked out and wanted to see what's going on. So they took him out of the grave, and his body was completely intact. And not only that, it was sweating out continuously like a liquid, a watery liquid. And they were taking it off with sheets and then taking the water out and using it for healing purposes, and a lot of miracles were done with that. And then again, in accordance with these procedures of the church, he was buried again and exhumed again and buried again and exhumed again. It was a whole thing. At one point, they put him into the grave behind the wall. It was more like a crypt situation. And after some time, they noticed that this liquid was coming through the wall because his body was emanating so much of this interesting healing liquid. So they took him out again, and again they took off the water from him. It would come so much that they would have to take out the sheets around him 2 times per week because he was just producing so much of this miraculous fluid. Again, the body, it didn't decay at all, like not even no signs of decay whatsoever. And at that time, it was tested over a period of 17 years. Several doctors were checking him out, what's going on with him. One doctor was so captivated by this case, he observed him 34 times, all in all, checking what is going on, and just nobody could explain what is happening there. He's remained incorrupted for 27 years, and that was then the last time they put him back into the grave. And the next time, which was just a few years later, they took him up, he was just a skeleton. He was just gone. The thing was over, the grace had been bestowed, the mission was done, and he completely disappeared in that way. What is interesting to observe from these miraculous cases of death or let's say what could be a transformative viewpoint upon encountering such miracles, contemplating such miracles, is to somehow gradually start to shift our attitude towards death. Like Uriel suggested, the first thing is to let go of our passivity in front of death and starting to face it as a natural consequence of living. Actually, living is only interesting because living ends at one point, because we have a certain set amount of years, a certain destiny, a certain character that we live out in this life, a certain mission, certain purpose, certain soul that we can explore now, which makes our individual life actually worth living. As you contemplate such miraculous deaths, hopefully, our suggestion would be that you come to also contemplate more your human condition, this interesting little time window that we are offered to transform in a miraculous way, to fulfill something wonderful, to perfect ourselves. All of these are options that you have as a human being to completely and utterly perfect yourself into full spiritual accomplishment. Once we understand by contemplating death, really facing it, that it is a gift being alive, that every moment that is passing is a gift, and referring back to the great Saint Milarepa, he would always think to himself, okay, if now I start cooking this meal and I die tonight, I will just be angry with myself that I didn't meditate, because what I really want to do is meditate. This is really what burns in my heart. When we contemplate the end, then we can also appreciate the moments that we will have until that ominous end, which we will not know when that will be, and hopefully make the best of it. With such a clear frame, evolution becomes inevitable. When you really contemplate this, really in your heart, without any trying to decorate it in some way, without trying to make yourself immortal in these idiotic ways that we try as modern human beings with, I don't know what kind of antenna extension we will invent next so that we can live another 5 years. But when you really contemplate it as a gift, as an opportunity, then evolution will become inevitable. As our perspective upon death is altered, our perspective upon life is altered. And just when we move actually even into a little bit more of an honorable attitude towards death, already a lot of the fears within our life will fall away. A lot of choices towards virtue will become much easier from this change of attitude. When then our change of attitude leads to a systematic practice, which is inevitable if you are really honestly contemplating it, then the event itself can change, and the whole experience of death will become rather a moment of profound grace, of transformation, of transition from one form into another, and in the case of these saints, becoming, even after your death, an amazing example of transformation, of miracles, and so forth. Another wonderful saint you could look into is the sweet Therese of Lisieux, the little flower of Jesus, as she would call herself, who lived a very, very humble, saintly life. And after her death, a lot of miracles occurred just by having her picture. So this was also a wonderful legacy somehow, that she became somewhat immortal through her practices, through her humbleness, through her virtuous nature. And this is, so to say, the next level. If now you bring your transformation to such a degree that you become immortal, you could actually really become immortal, as we have also examples of that, and Uriel will tell us more about these immortal saints from history. Hey guys, if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content on spirituality, Tantra, and more.
And if you want to sign up for our online classes or for our retreats, you can see our website on the description below.